Welcome to America This Week. United We Stand. I'm Eric Bolling. It's great to be back in the D.C. swamp, but the nation is still uneasy. America is balancing the difficult dance between reopening the economy and rising coronavirus cases. And in the middle of it all, protesters are in the streets shouting for police reform and justice. Feels like we're a nation divided, but now, more than ever, it's time for us all to unite. Several states saw significant rises in coronavirus cases this week, causing fears of a second wave. This week, I had the exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence and why he says media concerns over the increase are overblown. Take a listen.
Well, Eric, from the very outset of this coronavirus pandemic, thanks to President Trump's leadership early on, thanks to the sacrifices the American people have made. I mean, we slowed the spread. We flattened the curve. We saved lives. And despite the fact that that many in the media lately are seizing on new cases in some states around the country, the truth is we made great progress. And it's important to remember that when we started this, President Trump forged a partnership with commercial labs around the country that took us from only having done 8,000 coronavirus tests to now we do 500,000 tests a day. And much of the increase in testing in some states around, or increase in cases in some states around the country is a reflection of the fact that we're testing more than ever before. More than 23 million tests have been performed. And in the areas that we're paying particular attention to, in areas like Texas, some areas of California and Arizona, a portion of the new cases also represents what we call outbreaks in specific counties or communities. I mean, despite the fact that the media likes to put maps up that show large portions of the country, a large number of states turned red, the truth is, as I sit here today, only 11 counties in the United States have an acceleration of new cases in those counties. We're focusing on them, sending CDC personnel, and working to put those outbreaks down. But beyond that, only about 2% of the counties in the United States have any significant increase at all. That's the real story, and the fear-mongering that's been going on in much of the national media, I think, is a great disservice to the American people who literally in all 50 states and our territories are proving every day that we can reopen America, we can do it in a safe and responsible way. And we're going to continue to talk about the progress that we've made because of the American people every day going forward.
And you can catch the rest of my exclusive interview with the Vice President on this week's episode of America This Week. President Trump often calls himself the law and order president. This week, he issued executive orders that he says will fortify that message. But does it go far enough to calm concerns over policing in America? Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, shows us the latest from Washington.
It could change the way police respond to calls. A new executive order signed Tuesday by the president, he says, eliminating unnecessary dangers.
As part of this new credentialing process, choke calls will be banned, except if an officer's life is at risk.
He says there'd be databases to share information about officers with complaints over excessive force so they don't just jump from one department to another, and encouraging social workers to react alongside police in certain cases.
An individual who may be bipolar or schizophrenic, a police officer may get called in to deal with that type of response. We think in some of those situations, having a mental health professional more correctly deal with them may help de-escalate the situation.
Though critics worry officers being recertified isn't always enough to change the overall culture.
The police officers are not trained to de-escalate. They are trained to come in and crack heads. And certain situations like this one do not require any kind of head cracking.
While rooting out the so-called bad apples is vital, leaders say the anti-police sentiment right now could actually deter responsible officers or recruits from taking the job.
We are playing politics. We are bowing down, if you will, to try to appease the rioters, I think you're going to start seeing officers trying to find another place to go.
The president doing all of that while Congress working on its own measures, including possibly mandating body cameras. The president says he wants Congress to come up with bipartisan solutions that will actually go beyond what he has done. On Capitol Hill, Scott Thuman for America This Week.
Police reform has been a rallying cry of protesters coast to coast, but what does this reform look like? Joining me now is former NYPD Commissioner Kerik. Bernie, thank you for joining us. Listen, I want to focus in on something that, the president was talking about with his executive order. Use of force, specifically chokeholds. It seems to be a hot flashpoint for both sides. Tell us why the chokehold is so important in policing.
Well, and this is my own personal opinion, and I agree with the way the president has put it out. They want to ban the chokehold with the exception of life or death circumstances, and the reason that's so important: if a cop is in a position where the only way he can get a hold of a prisoner without being overpowered or without somebody grabbing his gun or taking his gun, the only way he can do that is a chokehold. A restrainment hold, a headlock. I'd rather him do that than pull out a sidearm and shoot and kill the guy, because that's what would happen. So you've got to give the cops the ability to defend themselves, especially in circumstances where they could be overpowered. And as we saw in Atlanta just a week ago, you had 2 cops, and I've seen 3 or 4 cops that have been overpowered by men they were trying to arrest, and they were left to either deadly physical force or the use of a taser or a chokehold.
Bernie, there's some infamous video out there of 2 patrolmen. They're on the highway. They pull over a perpetrator. They go to arrest him. There's a fight. A fight ensues. 2 cops, 1 guy. They're tasing him. They're struggling with him. He gets their gun. They get the gun back. They unload the gun, put it off to the side. Somehow he gets away, even after he's being tased, pulls the gun out of his car and shoots both of the cops, killing one of them. The other one jumped over the side. I understand this. Let's go to Atlanta. You mentioned Atlanta, and I don't think anyone's really spoken about this. So these cops are struggling with Rayshawn, with the perp. He was fighting back. He pulls the taser right out of one of the cop's holsters. The cop only has his handgun left at that point. Am I right? Am I missing this?
No, Eric, you're not missing it. And there's a bunch of things that people just haven't talked about. First and foremost, if you watch the entire body cam footage, those cops were extremely professional. They were courteous. They were nice. They were, they assisted him on getting his car pulled over. Everything was going fine until the officer told him he was under arrest, and he went to put handcuffs on him. And then the table turned. And when it turned, that suspect overpowered both of them. And he actually didn't take the taser from the holster. The cop had the taser in his hand. He jerked the taser out of his hand and then got up and took off, and at some point attempted to fire on the cop with the taser, at which time he was shot and killed. So there's a couple issues here that people should focus on. Don't think, you never know what's going to happen. In this case, everything was great. They had a good conversation. The cops were professional. They were nice. They were courteous. The tables turned when they placed him under arrest or attempted to.
Bernie, allow me to jump in here. And I hate the fact that someone died at this. Here's my question. So I watched that whole thing, 35 whatever minutes of that. It started out very congenial, started out fine. Are we at a state in America where a cop in those exact same circumstances cannot say, all right, buddy, you're drunk, give me the keys, walk it off, pick the keys up in the police station tomorrow when you're straight? Is that not going to happen anymore? Are we at a point where everyone's playing by these written rules, and I can do this, and I'm going to go to here, or I'm going to get fired or arrested? I just help us break it down, Bernie.
Well, here's the problem, Eric, and I think people don't realize this. Depending on the states, depending on under departmental policy, the officers may not have the discretion to do that. You know, years ago, you could get away with that. Now you have a body cam on. You have a body cam on, everything's recorded. You're out there to enforce the law. The guy takes a breathalyzer right in front of you, a sobriety test. He fails that test. At that point, you're obligated to put him under arrest, to place him under arrest. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what these cops were
honestly,
thinking. Did they let him go and get charged? I don't know.
This is going to go on. This debate's going to go on for a long time, Bernie. From this perspective, it looks like maybe we need some reforms as to what a cop would give the cop a little bit of leeway not to have to arrest someone if he doesn't want to. And number two, let's also take the other side of this as well. People, black, white, Asian, every color in the book have to stop resisting arrest. Deal with it. Let the lawyers deal with it tomorrow. Bernie Kerik, everybody, former police commissioner of NYPD. Thank you, sir.
Eric, thank you.
Ahead in America this week, united we stand. As the nation continues to reopen, is the U.S. heading for round 2 of coronavirus infections? The vice president told us no. Dr. Dena Grayson joins us next.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
Dozens of states are seeing a rise in coronavirus cases since lifting their stay-at-home orders. Does that mean we're headed for or in a second wave of COVID-19? Joining me now, pandemic expert, is back Dr. Dena Grayson. Doctor, are we in a second wave? Are we headed for a second wave? Vice President on this show says no. What do you say?
Well, we're not in a second wave yet, Eric, because we're still in the first wave. And so what we're seeing here is really a second peak to the first wave of infections. So in New York State, we are seeing the number of new cases drop. However, in other states, like my home state here of Florida, Arizona, Alabama, and close to 20 other states, we're actually, unfortunately, seeing a second spike in coronavirus cases.
But Doc, and the vice president, during that exclusive interview we had with him, I asked him that. I said, if Dr. Fauci thinks there's a second wave coming, and Birx and others like yourself, Dr. Grayson, what do you know that we don't know? And he said, look, Eric, the reason why cases are going up is because testing is going up. Testing is better. There's more of them, 500,000 per day now, he says. So although cases are going up, Dr. Grace, I see you shaking your head, but I went on several websites that are showing me the actual deaths of Americans are going down. So if deaths are going down, what does it matter if cases are going up? Aren't we staying out of a second wave if deaths can continue to decline?
Yeah, so a couple of things, Eric. So first of all, we know that, yes, the number of tests that are being conducted are going up. However, the positivity rate of those testing is going up much faster. So if you are increasing the number of tests and you're not changing the number of cases, that positivity rate should go down, not up. So we're heading in the wrong direction. We're heading in the wrong direction.
Well, hold on. Because we do know that over time, some of the early tests weren't that accurate. Some of them as low as 50% accuracy. So as you get better testing, maybe there's actually not a change in positivity, just a change in the actual product being administered.
Yeah, that's possible. But actually what we're seeing, Eric, is we're seeing a spike in hospitalizations. And so that you can't, that you can't spin. That's objective data that we're seeing.
I'm not spinning. I'm not spinning, but I can answer that too, doctor.
Well, hang on. We're seeing a number of increased hospitalizations. And lastly, death is a lagging indicator. So we have to wait here. This second peak is just starting. So people take weeks to die. So again, New York was driving a lot of the data in, a lot of the overall trends in the country. And the number of cases in New York have been decreasing for a while. Number of hospitalizations in New York have been decreasing for a while, as are deaths. So that's driving the overall numbers. Now, I think what we're likely going to see here is we're seeing this surge in hospitalizations, especially in places like Alabama and Arizona. We're also going to then, in a few weeks, start seeing the number of deaths, unfortunately, increase in those states.
We'll take a look back, but listen, I'm not trying to spin this at all. I'm trying to just analyze it. And I will tell you, I think a lot of the reason for the increase in hospitalizations is because of the increase in positive tests. So, you're walking around and you're asymptomatic or you're light symptoms, and all of a sudden you get, you have COVID-19. Suddenly,
but you don't hospitalize
I got to
those
get to the hospital.
No, you wouldn't get hospitalized. Your insurance company wouldn't reimburse for it. You only get hospitalized if you're seriously ill or critically ill. So if you have pneumonia, you might get hospitalized. Now, another difference also in the death rate is in New York. We know that in New York City, the hospitals for a while there were overwhelmed. The healthcare system was overwhelmed. We couldn't even get enough ambulances to transport people to the hospital, so people died at home. That's not happening yet in some of these other states, but we know we're close. In Alabama and several counties, the hospitals are at 96% capacity.
Doc, let me talk about this for a second. The big MAGA rallies, it looks like they're going to start. I'm guessing you don't like this idea.
Well, I don't think that any pandemic expert likes this idea, because we know that, again, we learn a lot about this virus every day, but we've got a lot of people packed in close together indoors and shouting, right? I mean, even if you're shouting with joy or singing in church, these are ways that this virus can spread. So having a lot of people packed, jammed inside indoors, shoulder to shoulder, and likely not wearing masks is an extremely bad idea. And you have Republican leaders in Oklahoma saying, please, Mr. Trump, don't do this right now.
Doc, I got 30 seconds or so. What about protesters? Was that a bad idea also?
I think that mass gatherings are a bad idea. At least the protesters were outside and most of them were wearing masks. But anytime you have mass gatherings, that's a real risk to spread the virus.
Interesting. I got to tell you, city to city, I live in South Carolina. It's a completely different atmosphere than right here in the swamp, in the D.C. swamp. It literally feels like we're in post-apocalypse walking around The Walking Dead. And I was a big fan of that series. That's what it kind of feels like around these parts. Doctor, and by the way, the South, just seems like they're getting over it. Dr. Dena Grayson, we appreciate your time. Thank you, pandemic expert and friend of the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Coming up on America This Week United, we stand a short walk down a ramp, ramped up questions on the president's health over the weekend. Dr. Nicole Saphier weighs in next.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American strong.
United we stand.
We stand American strong.
City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all.
American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American strong.
United we stand.
We stand American strong.
United we stand.
America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, points out how rough and tumble politics shape opinion in every region in our country. We tell American stories, stories that touch our people, determine our politics, focus on the future of America.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America this week. Last week, President Trump spoke at West Point's graduation ceremony. However, two very distinct moments have some media outlets raising the alarm over the president's health. Joining now is physician and author of Make America Healthy Again, Dr. Nicole Saphier. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Saphier. Can we just put this to rest? The man's 74 years old. He's walking down a ramp. It's moving. There's no handrails. He runs, jumps off the bottom of it. There are people who are saying they were worried about it. Your thoughts?
I'll be honest. I mean, I watched the video over and over again, and I, too, would be very wary of walking down that steep mobile ramp that didn't happen to have a railing. I think it's a leap for people to suggest that because of the way that he kind of shuffled down the ramp was because he suffered a stroke, perhaps. I mean, honestly, I think that's a stretch. I also think it's quite unethical for medical professionals to be giving that opinion when you know that is, honestly, there's just not necessarily a lot of truth to it. Now, but as you mentioned, he's 74 years old. Cardiovascular disease is the number one killer of Americans, and there's a lot of Americans out there who do have what we call mini strokes or strokes. However, I have yet to see any definitive evidence that would give me the impression that he had a stroke. So therefore, I just think it was a stretch to draw those conclusions.
Yeah, and then let's point out that ramp was moving. No handrail on a moving ramp. Whatever. Okay, they like to blow things up. The big MAGA rally that's happened this weekend in Tulsa. Thoughts about that many people that close? What do you think about? There was at some point there was maybe an idea of going outside, but your thoughts on that, MAGA rally?
Well, actually, Eric, and I want to actually point out one more thing, what they were talking about with President Trump, the way that he was lifting up his glass. They were saying that his right hand wasn't working, perhaps. But you have to remember that just about 5 minutes later, you actually saw him saluting with his right hand. So it was working just fine. So again, I think it's just the media running away with that narrative. Now, switching topics to the MAGA rally in Tulsa, I'll be honest, the congregation of mass of people right now in indoor spaces concerns me. We still have circulating virus going around that we know has a high level of transmissibility indoors. I wish that they would, I don't actually know, what the layout of this building is right now, but I hope that there's going to be some ventilation. If it had a retractable roof, that would be best case scenario, but not most places don't have that. But no, I do have some concerns about having mass gatherings being indoors. I have concerns about mass gatherings outdoors right now as well. We're still in the middle of a pandemic without proven treatments or a vaccine.
So I find it very fascinating, Dr. Nicole, that I'm watching enough cable news, and I see a lot of cable news people on the left saying, oh, my gosh, look, it's a second wave. We interviewed the vice president who said there is no second wave. There's better testing, so cases are going to go up. So I went one step further, and I watched people on Twitter saying, this is a second wave. The pandemic's coming back. Trump doesn't know what he's doing. But I went to NBC.com. Actually the heart of the anti-Trump movement, I would say. And on there's a chart talking about the number of mortalities, the deaths. That is actually turned down and turned down significantly. So who really cares? Should I worry about more cases when the actual thing that really matters are mortalities or deaths turning down? Isn't that the right direction we want?
Well, so let me tell you the way I see it right now. I still see this is still the first wave in regards to the majority of these cases that are seeing new rising cases. Yes, the rising cases has a part is because we're doing more testing. There is evidence that there's increased transmissibility in some of these states as well. And some of the hospitals are also reporting more cases being admitted there. But that being said, these states didn't have their wave before. So this is just a slow first wave for them. It's not necessarily their second wave. A second wave would be if we started seeing massively increased cases in the Northeast again. That would be our second wave. But as you're pointing out, while we're reporting new cases, the actual number of deaths is going down at this point. And that is because Americans are smart and responsible people. We have learned so much more about this virus than we knew in the last couple of months. So we are protecting our vulnerable. So those people going out right now, that's more of the younger, that's more of the healthy, those are the ones being infected, and our vulnerable, the elderly, are being protected. We are not seeing as many deaths, and that's what we want moving forward. That is how we're going to be able to continue having everything open and congregating and, living again, by making sure that we are protecting our vulnerable. And this is evidence that we're doing that.
We're going to leave it right there. Well said, Dr. Nicole Saphier. I appreciate your time. Make America healthy again, everybody. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Make sure you never miss a minute of America This Week or United We Stand. Be sure to set your DVR so you can catch our show at any time. Check out when we air in your city by going to facebook.com/America Bolling, all one word. We have a complete list at the top of that page, city by city.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand America.
United we stand.
We stand America.
United we stand. United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand America.
United we stand.
We stand America.
United we stand.
And that's a wrap from the DC Swamp. And man, did it feel good to be back. Thank you for joining me for another episode of America This Week, United We Stand. The nationwide protests against racial injustice has sparked another conversation over Confederate monuments. Several statues were removed from the public this week. Tonight, we leave you with the moment a statue of Confederate President Jefferson Davis being taken down from the Kentucky State Capitol building.